welcome to CBD Talks with Dr. Dance. I'm really Dr. Victoria Boyd, and I'm so glad to bring you CBD Talks. What is CBD Talks? It's all about CBD, the industry, cannabis, advocacy, the medical and historical background of cannabinoids. I'll be talking more about it. We've talked about your endocannabinoid system before, but today we're really going to talk about a real historical episode in the history of CBD. And I'm calling it the perfect storm because many people have asked me, well, why was it demonized? Why is there such a big stigma around CBD, cannabis, and even hemp, which was one of the largest crops in the US? So this is going to be a three-part series, and let's get started with part one, setting the stage. So in the 1850s, the US Census, it was documented that there were approximately 8,400 hemp plantations of at least 2,000 acres. Hemp was the leading industrial crop and used extensively for almost everything: rope, cloth, paper, to health elixirs and everyday remedies. The promise of hemp-based products was so great that they threatened to replace those made from petroleum-based petrochemicals, such as synthetic fibers and even gasoline. That was intimidating to corporate barons such as Rockefeller, Hearst, Mellon, Carnegie, and DuPont. Billions in profits were at risk for the entrenched old-school businesses and their financial backers and cronies. What happened? Who set the wheels turning? A string of events and a complex tangle of greed, nepotism, and industrial sabotage surrounded this tale of economics, cronyism, barons, racism, and backroom conspiracies. So let's start with the leading protagonist of this story, William Randolph Hearst and Harry Anslinger. William Randolph Hearst was a media empire that included 20 daily and 11 Sunday newspapers in 13 cities. He controlled King Features Syndicate and the International News Service, as well as 6 magazines, including Cosmopolitan, Good Housekeeping, and Harper's Bazaar. He's credited as the founder of yellow journalism and a style which employed sprawling banner headlines and hyperbolic stories, many based on speculation and half-truths, what we call today as fake news or propaganda. He also ventured into motion pictures with a newsreel and a film company. And in that era, newsreels were before every feature. During the 1920s, he and his empire were at their zenith. Hearst was heavily invested in the timber industry. Go figure, he owned the newspapers. To support his newspaper, and hemp crops were a direct competition. Hearst, according to one biography, hated minorities and used his chain of newspapers to aggravate racial tensions at every opportunity. His motives were sort of understandable. He lost 800,000 acres of timberland to Pancho Villa during the Mexican Revolution. His means of institutionalizing his bigotry, however, were less deserving of empathy. It was Hearst's effort that made the term marijuana, and that's spelled with a J, derived from the Mexican slang word marijuana, spelled with a H. Now, whether this was either purposely or accidentally misspelled, we'll never know. But he made it popular in the early 1900s, and the term appeared in magazines and newspapers owned by him. Hearst, via his publishing and film companies, continually attempted to taint public perception of the plant by leveraging popular prejudice against Mexican Americans. The movie Reefer Madness was produced by Hearst and is a prime example of his work. Now, let's talk about Harry Anslinger. Anslinger gained notoriety early in his career, really early, at the age of 23 in 1915, while working as an investigator for the Pennsylvania Railroad. He performed a detailed investigation that found the $50,000 claim of a widower in a railroad accident to be fraudulent. He saved the company the payout and was promoted to captain of railroad police. So from 1917 to 1928, Anslinger worked for various military and police organizations on stopping international drug trafficking. His duties took him all over the world, from Germany to Venezuela to Japan. He is widely credited with shaping not only Americans' domestic and international drug policies, but influencing drug policies of other nations, particularly those that had not debated the issues internally. In this era, nepotism was in full force, and in 1930, Anslinger was appointed by his wife's uncle, United States Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon of the Mellon Bank Empire, one of the most powerful financial institutions in the world at the time. He promoted him as director of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. That's the precursor to DEA today. His following actions were then clearly driven by the need to protect the family's interests and his racism, as documented by his numerous statements and rationale for the banning of cannabis. Reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men. With the support of Hearst to promote this agenda, Anslinger was able to build a solid campaign on several fronts. So now the plan is growing, and this perfect storm will continue to evolve as William Randall Hearst and Harry Anslinger get their plan moving with strategic alliances formed amongst some of the most powerful men, all protecting their personal interests. Let's introduce now John D. Rockefeller. Yes, that John D. Rockefeller was an oil petroleum baron who was developing pharmaceuticals from oil byproducts. This was a wonderful opportunity for Rockefeller, who saw the ability to monopolize the oil, chemical, and medical industries all at the same time. The best thing about petrochemicals was that everything could be patented and sold for higher profits. But there was one problem with Rockefeller's plan for the medical industry in particular. Natural and herbal medicines were very popular in America at that time. That's what everyone used. Rockefeller, the monopolist, had to figure out a way to get rid of his biggest competition. So he used the classic strategy of problem, reaction, solution. And what that means is you create a problem, you scare the people, and then you offer a pre-planned solution. Similar to the terrorist scare, followed by the Patriot Act. Let's think about that. He went to his buddy, Andrew Carnegie. Now, I'm imagining that all of these names are familiar to you. Carnegie was a rich philanthropist and plutocrat who made his money from monopolizing the steel industry. And they devised a scheme led by his Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Endowment, and later the Lilly Trust from Eli Lilly. They steered the paradigm of medicine into the direction they wanted. They commissioned and funded a prestigious study funded by Carnegie Foundation. They sent a man named Abraham Flexner to report on the status of medical colleges and hospitals around the country. Now remember, they funded this research. The release and distribution of the Flexner report, which they funded, I'm underlining that again, was the turning point and gave birth to the modern medicine as we know it. Needless to say, the report talked about the need for revamping and centralizing our medical institutions. Based on this report, more than half of all medical colleges were closed. Let that sink in for a while. Almost half of all the doctors and medical colleges in the U.S. practice natural holistic medicine, using knowledge from Europe and Native Americans. Okay, think about that. In the Flexner report, homeopathy and natural medicines were mocked and demonized, and doctors were even jailed. All of this allowed the powers to be to suppress neuropathy, and essentially making neuropathic natural medicine illegal, promoting what made them profit. Rockefeller and his affiliates criminalized the free practice of medicine itself and created licensing laws. Licenses mostly given to doctors practicing their allopathic medicine, which means they use their pharmaceutical medicine. These were systems founded by oligarchs and plutocrats, not by doctors. One more point of contention. Let's talk cancer and chemotherapy. The American Cancer Society was founded by none other than Rockefeller in 1913. Rockefeller even had a hand in the prohibition of alcohol, effectively crushing competition from alcohol-based fuel. The ban on cannabis was later a culmination of all of these efforts. To round out the cast of characters, two more influential powerhouses play their part. Enter Lamont DuPont II, heir to the DuPont Chemical Company, founded in 1802 as a gunpowder mill by his grandfather, a French-American chemist and industrialist. During the 1930s, one of their leading chemists, Wallace Carothers, and his team synthesized two new polymers, neoprene, a synthetic rubber greatly used during the war, and a white elastic that later became nylon. With the invention of nylon, he was allegedly afraid of competition from hemp fiber. And what was the biggest industrial crop and source of fiber, cloth, and all of those papers and things that we talked about earlier? Hemp. If you recall, we mentioned Andrew Mellon, U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, and yes, the brother-in-law that appointed Harry Anslinger as director of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. He too was one of the nation's richest men and had huge investments in, wait for it, the DuPont Chemical Company, making him another key player with significant influence. So now the main characters are all in part, and we will detail that in the next section. We're going to take a real quick break right now and come back with the final episodes of The Perfect Storm, The Winds of Change. Be right back. Five top benefits of HempWorks CBD. Number 5,
reduces stress and anxiety. Number 4, supports heart health. Number 3, protects immune system. Number 2, anti-inflammation. And number 1, pain relief. 10 reasons you need HempWorks as your source for CBD. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It works.
Okay, welcome back. Here I am, Dr. Dance. I've given you a fascinating story in this perfect storm story that is really covering the history of how cannabis and hemp got demonized. And so now we're going to talk about the winds of change. This is the final segment in this story. The stage is set with Hearst and Aslinger in leading roles, and Rockefeller, DuPont II, and Mellon rounding out the cast. They were at the center of what was happening in society: growing industrial revolution, corporate competition, and racism. The quick summary is the wealthy were controlling government decision making. Does that sound familiar? However, let's get back to this. There is a slightly more complex version that evolved over years, culminating in the hard push between 1932 and 1937, led by this small, powerful group of businessmen who belonged to this tight-knit, good old boys club. Hearst's editorial influence started long before his single campaign. With his paper's massive distribution from coast to coast and flair for yellow journalism, he had an impact on numerous foreign and domestic policies and actions. The Mexican Revolution had a particularly profound effect, and in the early 1900s, he started pushing a racial platform. Aslinger was at the center of the campaign because he held the legal keys. By using mass media as his forum, with support from Hearst, the well-versed expert of yellow journalism and how to spin a story, Aslinger was able to create an anti-marijuana campaign grounded in racism sentiment during all those years. There were two components in his strategy, which included, first, that weed is evil, and second, the racial spin, that according to him, only Latinos and Black people were smoking marijuana, and made them forget their place in society. Remember, although originally called Indian hemp or Cannabis India, the word marijuana was popularized by the forces who were out to ban it. In a political spin move, Aslinger pointed to immigrant Mexican and Blacks as the prime users of illicit cannabis, and he began publicly referring to it as marijuana, the Mexican name, as a weasel word to associate it with low status or criminal immigrants. Andrew Mellon put the right person in the right government position. DuPont and Rockefeller were building chemical and pharmaceutical empires and needed to control or kill their competition. Their expert voice, even though neither was a doctor or chemist from those industries, validated the picture being painted, so they helped and supported where they were needed. Hearst's newspapers absolutely sensationalized and exaggerated marijuana crimes and the dangers of the drug, but so did virtually all publications of the day. Aslinger's Federal Bureau of Narcotics pumped a constant stream of historical press releases to satiate the media, blaming murderers on single reefer doses of the drug and all sorts of crazy amplifications. A 1936 church film called Tell Your Children was massively promoted nationwide and remade by Hollywood, Hearst's company, as the 1936 Reefer Madness, a cautionary tale designed to show the horrific results of marijuana. By the time the Marijuana Tax Act was passed, the United States population was well primed to view cannabis as the deadly symbol of the criminal immigrant class. To help with the transition and change the mind of other doctors and scientists, Rockefeller gave more than $100 million to colleges, hospitals, and founded a philanthropic front group called General Education Board, the GEB. This is the classic carrot and stick approach. In a very short time, medical colleges were all streamlined and homogenized. All the students were learning the same thing, and medicine was all about using patented drugs. Scientists received huge grants to study how plants cured diseases, but their goal was to first identify which chemical in the plant was effective and then recreate a similar chemical, not identical, in the lab that could be patented. A pill for an ill became the mantra for modern medicine. So now, here we are, 100 years later, churning out doctors who know nothing about the benefits of nutrition or herbs or any holistic practices. We have an entire society that is enslaved to corporations for its well-being. America spends $150 million of its gross products on health care, which should be really called sick care. It is focused not on a cure, but only on symptoms, thus creating repeat customers. There is no cure for cancers, diabetes, autism, asthma, or even the flu. Why would there be a real cure? We have a pill for every ill. Thank you for tuning in, and that's CBD Talks for today.